Why Van Gogh was obsessed with Japanese ukiyo-e art. Van Gogh, Monet, Klimt, three of the greatest artists Western civilization ever produced, and all three of them were copying Japan, not inspired by Japan, not influenced by Japan, copying it. There's a painting hanging in a museum in Paris right now, painted by Van Gogh, that is almost identical to a Japanese woodblock print made 100 years before he was born. How did that happen? And why did the art world try to hide it? That's what we're covering today. What is ukiyo-e? Before we get to Van Gogh, you need to understand what ukiyo-e actually is, because most people get this wrong. Ukiyo-e, literally translated, it means pictures of the floating world, not pictures of mountains, not pictures of temples, pictures of the floating world. That phrase, floating world, was Edo-period slang for the entertainment districts of Tokyo. The theaters, the tea houses, the places where ordinary people went to escape their everyday lives, and the art that came out of those places. It was revolutionary. This wasn't art made for emperors or samurai. This was art made for the people. Woodblock prints that were mass-produced and sold on street corners. The Instagram of 1750. Cheap enough for anyone to buy, beautiful enough to hang in any home, and the artists who made them became the first pop culture icons in history. Names like Katsushika Hokusai, Utagawa Hiroshige, Kitagawa Utamaro. These weren't just artists, they were celebrities, and their work would eventually travel halfway around the world and change everything. How Japan reached Europe, here's where the story gets strange. For over 200 years, Japan was completely closed to the outside world. No trade, no travel, no contact with the West. It was called Sakoku, the locked country policy. But in 1854, American warships forced Japan to open its ports, and suddenly Japanese goods began flooding into Europe: silk, ceramics, lacquerware, and stuffed inside those ceramic shipments used as packing material were woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, crumpled up, used as padding, thrown away. And European artists found them in the trash. Monet pulled them out of shipping crates. Van Gogh collected over 400 of them and pinned them to the walls of every studio he ever lived in. There's a self-portrait Van Gogh painted in 1888. Look closely at the background, Japanese prints, hanging on the wall. He wasn't hiding his obsession. He was proud of it. Now here's the part most art history classes skip. Van Gogh didn't just like ukiyo-e, he copied it directly. In 1887, he made oil painting reproductions of two specific Hiroshige prints, almost stroke for stroke. One was called Plum Park in Kamado. The other, Sudden Shower over Shinohashi Bridge. Side by side, they are nearly identical. Same composition, same flat perspective, same bold outlines, but Van Gogh added something. He painted Japanese kanji characters around the borders, characters he copied without fully understanding what they said, which means somewhere in a Paris museum, there is a Van Gogh painting with random Japanese text decorating the edges. He didn't care that he couldn't read it. To him, the characters looked like art. And that tells you everything about how Western artists saw Japan in the 1880s. Not as a culture to understand, as an aesthetic to absorb, but what they took, the flat perspective, the bold outlines, the unusual cropping, these weren't just stylistic choices, they were solutions. European painters had been struggling for centuries with how to show depth, movement, and emotion simultaneously. Ukiyo-e had already solved it. The diagonal lines that make Hiroshige's rain look like it's actually falling. The asymmetrical compositions that make Hokusai's wave look like it's about to crash through the canvas. These were technical innovations, and Western art absorbed them almost overnight. The movement that followed has a name, Japanisme, and it didn't just change Van Gogh, it changed Toulouse-Lautrec, Gauguin, Mary Cassatt, Gustav Klimt. The swirling patterns in Klimt's The Kiss, that's ukiyo-e. What makes ukiyo-e special? Here's what I find remarkable about all of this. Hokusai made the great wave when he was 71 years old. He had already changed his name and his artistic style more than 30 times throughout his life, constantly trying to improve. When he died at 89, his final words were reportedly, "If I could have just 10 more years, just 5 more years, I could have become a real painter." That restlessness, that obsession with craft, that's the spirit inside every ukiyo-e print. These weren't decorations. They were the life's work of people who cared deeply about beauty, about storytelling, about leaving something behind. And they did leave something behind, not just in museums, in Van Gogh's brushstrokes, in Monet's water lilies, in the flat, bold design language you see in everything from Marvel posters to iPhone ads. Ukiyo-e is everywhere. Most people just don't know it yet. What's next now? I want to leave you with a question. Van Gogh copied Japanese art his entire career. But in doing so, he created something entirely new, something that could only have come from him. Is that imitation? Or is that how all great art works? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And if this kind of deep dive into Japanese visual culture is something you want more of. Next week, I'm covering something that most Westerners find even more fascinating than ukiyo-e, Japanese family crests. Kamen. These are symbols that samurai clans lived and died to protect. Every major clan had one. And the stories behind them are extraordinary. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.